You know, there's a specific kind of silence that falls over a room when something truly uncomfortable happens. Not the quiet of a library, but the suffocating, heavy silence where everyone is holding their breath, waiting to see who's going to be the first to break the tension or look away. I saw that silence shatter a little girl's heart on a Tuesday afternoon in November. And let me tell you, it changed the way I look at the world forever. It started with a question. Just for simple words whispered by a soaking wet 8-year-old girl standing in the doorway of a packed coffee shop. Can I sit here? She was shivering, her little yellow raincoat dripping onto the floor. But what everyone was staring at wasn't the water pooling around her boots, it was her right leg. From the knee down, it was a sleek, silver prosthetic, gleaming under the harsh fluorescent lights. And the way people looked at her, God, it makes my blood boil just thinking about it. But to really understand why this moment mattered, why it wasn't just another sad scene in a cruel world, you have to understand the man who was watching from the back corner. His name was Elias Thorne. Elias was a big guy, broad shoulders, hands rough from years of manual labor. The kind of guy who looked like he could lift a truck, but had eyes that held a deep, quiet kind of sorrow. See, Elias wasn't just a cafe owner. He was a man holding onto life by his fingernails. That same morning, at 5:30 a.m., Elias had woken up in the gray light of dawn in a house that was too quiet. For 3 years, the silence had been his roommate. He lay there for a few seconds, staring at the empty pillow next to him, then at the framed photo on the nightstand. Sarah, his wife. In the picture, she was radiant, caught mid-laugh, the sun catching her hair in a way that made her look like an angel, which, considering she'd been gone for 3 years now, felt painfully appropriate. Cancer is a thief, folks. It doesn't just take the person. It takes the future you promised each other. Elias whispered "Good morning, beautiful" to the photo, just like he did every single day, forced a smile onto his face, and got up. He had to. He had Leo to think about. Leo was his 10-year-old son, a kid with a heart too big for his chest and a dream of becoming a chef. That was currently costing Elias more money than he had. When Elias peeked into Leo's room, the kid was asleep with a cookbook clutching to his chest like a teddy bear. The Young Chef's Guide to Flavor. Elias looked at the drawings taped to Leo's wall crayon masterpieces of a restaurant called Leo's Feast, with Elias drawn sitting at a VIP table eating a burger the size of a house. It made Elias smile, but then the anxiety hit him like a punch to the gut. The culinary field trip, $75. It doesn't sound like much to some people, maybe a dinner out or a tank of gas, but to Elias, that $75 was a mountain he couldn't climb. He was already 2 weeks late on the after-school program fees. The water bill was pink, the electric bill was final notice yellow. He kissed Leo's forehead, whispering, "I'll figure it out, buddy." Daddy always figures it out, even though, for the first time, he wasn't sure if that was true. He walked to work to save gas, heading down into the heart of Iron Creek. Now, Iron Creek used to be a steel town, booming and loud, but the mills closed a decade ago and took the town's heartbeat with them. Now, it was a ghost town of for-lease signs and boarded-up windows. But on the corner of Main and 4th, there was still a light on, the Rusty Spoon. That was Elias's place. It wasn't fancy. The espresso machine sounded like a dying tractor, and the chairs didn't match. But it was warm. Elias ran that place on debt and love. He had a chalkboard special that read "Today's special, Hope, served warm, $2.50. He had regulars who were just as broken as the town. There was Mrs. Gable, 82, who sat by the window every day because her house was too quiet since her husband passed. Elias never charged her for her tea. She thought she had a lifetime membership, but the truth was, Elias just couldn't bear to take her money. Then there was Pete, a laid-off construction worker who sat for hours using the free Wi-Fi to apply for jobs. That didn't exist. Elias kept his mug full, no charge. That morning, the phone rang. It was the school. "Mr. Thorne," the teacher said, her voice kind but firm. "Leo is the only student who hasn't paid the deposit for the Culinary Institute trip. The deadline is today." Elias felt the shame burn his neck. He promised he'd handle it, hung up, and stared at the stack of bills on the counter. feeling like the walls were closing in. Then, the weather turned. And I mean it turned fast. The sky went from a bruise-colored gray to pitch black in minutes. The wind started howling, tearing trash down the street, and then the rain came down in sheets. Biblical rain. People on the street scrambled for cover, diving into the nearest open door, which happened to be the Rusty Spoon. Suddenly, Elias's quiet little sanctuary was packed. But these weren't his regulars. These were folks from the Hill, the wealthy development on the other side of the river. They were in designer raincoats, clutching leather bags, looking around the cafe with curled lips. That's when the door opened again, and she walked in. Sophie, 8 years old, blonde hair plastered to her skull, shivering so hard her teeth were chattering. And that silver leg. She stood there, water pooling around her, looking for a place to rest. The cafe was full. Every chair was taken. She took a breath, gripped her backpack straps, and walked up to the first table. At table 1 sat a woman who looked like she stepped out of a magazine. Perfect makeup, expensive bag on the chair next to her. Sophie approached her, voice trembling. "Excuse me, ma'am, can I sit here? Just until the rain stops?" The woman looked Sophie up and down, her gaze lingering on the metal leg with open disgust. She actually pulled her purse closer, like Sophie was going to infect it. "Here," she scoffed. "This isn't a shelter, sweetie. You're dripping on my Gucci. Go find somewhere else." Sophie flinched like she'd been slapped. She mumbled a sorry and moved to the next table. A businessman in a sharp suit was typing on his phone. "Excuse me, sir." Sophie tried again. "Can I?" He didn't even look up. "Where are your parents, kid?" He glanced up then, saw the leg, and let out a cruel, short laugh. "Let me guess, they left you because you're damaged goods? Don't stand there, you're blocking my light." My heart broke watching her shoulders slump. She turned to a table of college students, thinking maybe they'd be kinder. They weren't. One girl pulled out her phone and started recording, whispering to her friends. "Oh my God, look at her. It's so sad, it's creepy." They giggled, covering their mouths, treating a human child like a sideshow exhibit. Sophie stood in the middle of the room, surrounded by people, completely alone. She was trembling, holding back tears because she learned a long time ago that crying makes people stare more. She looked around one last time, desperate, and her eyes landed on the back corner. That's where Elias was sitting. He was taking a break at the bad table, the one with the wobbly leg right next to the kitchen door, the spot no paying customer wanted. He was watching her, but his eyes, they weren't cold, they weren't pitying, they were warm, they were familiar. Sophie walked over to him. It was her last hope. "Excuse me, sir," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the rain pounding on the roof. "Can I sit here?" Elias looked at her. He saw the wet hair, the shivering frame, the metal leg. But he saw more than that. He saw himself at 10 years old, asking for help and getting doors slammed in his face. He saw Leo, forcing a brave face when the other kids made fun of his thrift store shoes. He saw Sarah, who always said that everyone has a story if you just listen. Elias didn't just say yes. He stood up. He smiled, not a customer service smile, but a real one, the kind that reaches the eyes. "Sit here," he boomed, his voice deep and gentle. "Absolutely not." Sophie froze. Her face crumpled. Another rejection. She turned to leave. No. Hold on," Elias said, stepping around the table and kneeling down so he was eye level with her. "You misunderstand me. I said you can't sit here because this table is wobbly and it's right by the drafty door. A warrior like you deserve the best seat in the house." The cafe went silent. The rich lady with the Gucci bag stopped chewing. The businessman stopped typing. Elias held out his hand, his big, rough, coffee-stained hand. "I have a VIP table right by the fireplace. It's reserved for royalty, but I think you qualify. And it comes with a special hot chocolate. Do you like marshmallows?" Sophie looked at his hand, then up at his face. Her lip quivered. She slowly reached out and put her tiny, cold hand in his eye. "I love marshmallows," she whispered. "Then right this way, Your Highness," Elias said. He led her through the silent cafe, past the stunned faces of the people who had treated her like trash. He walked with his head held high, holding the hand of a little girl with a metal leg. And for a moment, he looked like the richest man in the room. He sat her down in a plush armchair by the electric fireplace. It was his spot, the place he usually kept for himself to do paperwork, where he kept a little framed photo of Sarah. He moved his papers aside. "Get warm," he told her. "I'll be right back." Elias went behind the counter and started making the Sarah special. It wasn't on the menu. Extra cocoa, a dash of cinnamon, steamed milk, not water, and the finishing touch marshmallows arranged in a smiley face. Sarah used to make it for Leo whenever he had a bad day. Elias hadn't made one in 3 years. It hurt too much. But today, looking at that little girl, he knew he had to. He placed the mug in front of her. "Mr. Marshmallow is reporting for duty," he said softly. Sophie looked down at the smiley face floating in the chocolate. She stared at it for a long time, and then a single tear rolled down her cheek and plopped into the mug. "Is it okay?" Elias asked, worried. "It's perfect," she choked out. "My mom, she used to make smiley faces like this." Before the accident, Elias pulled up a chair. He didn't rush away to serve the paying customers. He sat with her. "My wife did too," he said. "I'm Elias. What's your name?" "Sophie," she said. She took a sip, leaving a foam mustache on her lip. "My mom and dad died in the car crash. That's when I lost my leg, too." The air around them felt heavy, but shared burdens are lighter. "I lost my wife to sickness," Elias shared. "It's hard, isn't it? Being the one left behind?" "Does it?" When that black car pulled away, the whispers in the cafe started up like a hive of bees. Mrs. Gable, my favorite regular, hobbled over to the counter with a speed I didn't know she possessed. "Elias," she hissed, her eyes wide as saucers. "Do you have any idea who that was?" "Just a grandma picking up her kid, Mrs. G," Elias said, tossing a rag into the sink. He was exhausted. The adrenaline of the storm was wearing off, and the reality of the unpaid bills was creeping back in. "That was Victoria Sterling," Mrs. Gable whispered, like saying the name aloud might summon lightning. "The matriarch of the Sterling family. Steel, hospitals, tech. She owns half the state. Elias, she's a billionaire." Elias froze. He looked down at his rough hands. He had just refused $100 from a billionaire. "Well," he sighed, a dry chuckle escaping his lips. "I guess that makes me the poorest idiot in Iron Creek. Or the richest," Pete said from his corner, looking up from his phone. "You kept your dignity, man. That's worth more than a C note." That night, Elias sat at his kitchen table, the silence of the house pressing in on him again. Leo was asleep, dreaming of robot legs and sofas. Elias stared at the bills. $75. He still didn't have it. He put his head in his hands, feeling the weight of failure crushing his chest. Then, his phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "Mr. Thorne, thank you for today. You gave Sophie something money cannot buy, belonging. I would like to discuss a business opportunity with you. Tomorrow, 9 a.m. at your cafe. Victoria Sterling. Elias read it 3 times. He didn't sleep a wink that night. The next morning, the rusty spoon was empty. Elias had flipped the sign to closed for the meeting. At 9 a.m. sharp, the black car returned. Victoria Sterling walked in, not with Sophie this time, but with a man in a sharp suit carrying a briefcase. "Good morning, Mr. Thorne," she said, sitting at the table by the fireplace. "Sophie's table, Mrs. Sterling," Elias said, wiping his palms on his apron. I'm honored, but I don't know what kind of opportunity you could have for a guy who makes $2 coffee." Victoria gestured for him to sit. "I'll get straight to the point. 10 years ago, my son and his wife died. Sophie was the only survivor. Since then, I've had all the money in the world, but I've been looking for something I couldn't buy." She paused, her steel gray eyes softening. "I've been looking for a heart. I established the Sterling Hope Foundation to build community centers in forgotten towns, places where kids can learn, where families can get support, where no one is turned away. But I needed someone to run the flagship center here in Iron Creek. I needed someone who understands that dignity is a right, not a luxury." She leaned forward. "I've been testing people for months, Elias. I've sent people into shops all over the state, people looking for help, people looking different. And time again, I saw them ignored, mocked, or treated like charity cases. Yesterday, I sent Sophie in alone. It was a risk, but I needed to know. Elias felt a chill. It was a test. It was, she admitted. And you're the only one who passed. You didn't just give her a seat. You gave her the best seat. You didn't treat her like a victim. You treated her like a guest. The man in the suit slid a folder across the table. Victoria tapped it. This is a proposal for the Sterling Community Hub. We're investing $15 million into Iron Creek. We're building a prosthetic clinic, a small business incubator, and a culinary arts school for children. Elias's jaw dropped. That's incredible for the town. But what does it have to do with me? We need a director, Victoria said. Salary is $85,000 a year, full benefits, housing allowance, and a full scholarship for your son, Leo, to any culinary program he chooses when he's of age. Elias felt like the room was spinning. $85,000. That was life-changing. That was security. That was Leo's future secured. Tears pricked his eyes. I don't know what to say. I'm just a guy who pours coffee. There's one more thing, Victoria said softly. She reached into her bag and pulled out a photograph. She slid it across the table. Elias looked down and his heart stopped beating for a second. It was a photo of Sarah. His Sarah. She was wearing a t-shirt with the Sterling Foundation logo, serving food at a shelter, her smile wide and bright. You knew her. Elias whispered, his voice trembling. Sarah was one of our best volunteers years ago. Before she moved here, Victoria said, I didn't make the connection until I ran a background check on you last night. One found her old evaluations in our files. One supervisor wrote, Sarah doesn't just feed people. She makes them feel seen. She believes kindness multiplies. Elias broke down. He put his head on the table and wept. He cried for the years without her, for the struggle, for the fact that even from beyond the grave, Sarah was still taking care of them. She had planted seeds of kindness years ago that were just now blooming to save her husband and son. We want to name the culinary wing after her, Victoria said gently. The Sarah Thorne Kitchen. Elias looked up, wiping his face with his apron. He looked at the empty cafe, which suddenly felt full of light. I accept, he choked out. I accept. The next few years were a blur of construction dust and joy. The center rose from the ashes of an old factory. It was beautiful, and at the grand opening, the whole town turned out. There was Mrs. Gable, cutting the ribbon for the senior center. There was Pete, who Elias hired as the site manager, wearing a hard hat and looking proud for the first time in years. And right in the front row, holding hands, were Leo and Sophie. Leo was 12 now, standing tall in a chef's coat, leading a tour of the Sarah Thorne Kitchen. He was showing a group of kids how to make the signature dish, hot chocolate with a smiley face. Now remember, Leo told the kids, his voice sounding so much like his father's, the most important ingredient isn't the cocoa. It's who you make it for. Elias stood in the back watching. He wore a suit, but he still had that warm, approachable look. Victoria stood beside him. You did good, Elias, she said. We did good. He corrected. Just then, it started to rain outside. Not a storm, just a gentle shower. The doors of the center opened, and a young boy walked in. He looked ragged, maybe 7 years old, his clothes too big for him. He was missing his left arm. He stood in the doorway, looking terrified, scanning the crowded room full of happy people, looking like he was about to turn around and run back into the rain. But he didn't get the chance. Sophie saw him first. She walked right over, her silver leg flashing as she moved. And Leo was right behind her, holding a mug. Hey there, Sophie said, squatting down to his level. Rough weather out there, huh? The boy nodded, eyeing the crowd nervously. I don't have any money, Sophie smiled. She looked at Elias across the room, and Elias nodded, his heart swelling so big he thought it might burst. Money? Sophie laughed. We don't need money here. You look like a VIP to me. She extended her hand. Come on. I've got the best seat in the house saved just for you. And my friend Leo here makes a hot chocolate that will change your life. The boy took her hand. He smiled. And as they walked him toward the fireplace, Elias looked up at the photo of Sarah hanging above the entrance. "You see that, baby?" he whispered. The tree grew round the fence, and now it's providing shade for everyone. Elias Griffin didn't have much. He wasn't a billionaire. He wasn't a genius. But when the world turned its back, he opened his arms. He proved that you don't need $1 million to change a life. You just need to be the one person who says, "Yes, you can sit here." So, here is my challenge to you today.